right, good morning and thanks for joining us on VOP this morning. My name is Moses Humphrey and working with me this morning is Esther Nwachukwu. Well, yesterday marked a watershed in Nigeria's democracy with the inauguration of its 16th head of government, Executive President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and from his promise of 1 million jobs to his definitive declaration that subsidy is gone, with price of fuel already shooting through the roof. Reminds me of the song Eba Mi Sopo Ti Lo. Oh well, we'll be looking at everything he said in his inaugural speech, and sure you would like to be part of everything that we do right here on VOP TV by liking and subscribing to our pages on YouTube. On YouTube, it is Voice of the People TV, and on other social media platforms, VOP TV Live.
Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was sworn in yesterday, along with his deputy, Vice President Kashim Shettima, by Chief Justice of the Federation, Justice Oluwakayode Ariwola, at the 5,000-seater capacity Eagle Square in Abuja. Now, in his inaugural speech, the president titled The Nigerian Ideal. We could deduce no fewer than 10 policy highlights President Tinubu proposed and whether these are achievable indeed. Now, joining us in the studio today, also and virtually, Tony Nnadi, who is Secretary of the Lower Niger Congress, as well as with us physically, Adeniyi Kunu. Adeniyi Kunu is a researcher, a public commentator, a political affairs analyst, in fact, and so much more. Adeniyi Kunu, welcome to VOP this morning.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for the invitation, I must say.
All right. Now, gentlemen, well, we'll start with you, gentlemen. The president is yet to spend his first full day in office, and already we're witnessing a spike in the price of fuel. While I was coming to the office, I could see queues at majority of the filling stations just because of the speech he made yesterday. Now, some policymakers and economic strategists feel that that was a wrong call for him. Although during his campaign, he has emphasized, that he was going to ensure that fuel subsidy was totally removed. But the federal government, on the exited President Muhammadu Buhari, said that by June ending, definitely that was the proposal, that fuel subsidy will totally be off it. And during the campaign, because of the hardship Nigerians were going through with the Naira redesign policy, there was also fuel scarcity at the time, if you will recall. They felt it to be cumbersome, so they decided to wait and store. But the president, during his inaugural speech yesterday, immediately he said what he said. Already we saw queues at majority of the filling stations. Do you think that was the right call he made by announcing that at his inaugural speech?
In the first place, presidents must make speeches. And what do speeches do? They highlight the intent of the person that has just assumed office. So the blame doesn't fall with the president of the country. It falls with people who always want to blame government for everything, but they don't want to take responsibility. We know in this country at some point when government has said X amount because of certain provision, but people have gone their way. So I think that we should try to have the right optics here. He has highlighted, that's not the only thing he said. He talked about employment, he talked about infrastructure. So I'm just simply saying here that if somebody mentions that it will go, most definitely he has not told us a timeline. And I don't expect anybody to panic. It is for people, especially those who sell, to wait until he has given the action. Don't forget here that every year we can actually, administer the budget of the previous year up until June of a fresh year. It means, therefore, that was why the President Muhammadu Buhari administration latched onto the opening and said subsidy will go by June. Of course, there have been pre-verification by the former finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, regarding if subsidy will go or not. She had said it. And later on, they've told us it may not be feasible to end subsidy by June. But if a current president tells you that subsidy will be no more, it is only proper for people to let him tell us what those things are and when before they start acting. So I won't blame the president for that. I'll blame people who always want to take advantage of every opportunity to fleece the average person. And I think that is it. The budget we are still running is not a Tinubu budget. It's a Buhari budget. So I need people to put things in proper perspective before everybody go wrong on that. So that's a picture I want to create here.
All right, then. So now he also did say something about electricity. He said accessible and stable electricity will be guaranteed.
Yes.
And he pointed out that states will be allowed to generate and distribute their own electricity.
Yeah.
And we also know that the Buhari administration signed a bill in that regard.
Well,
How feasible?
Quite frankly, I have to say that if I were to look at the bills that the former president signed off at the later stages of his, administration, I think some of those things were not thought through, and perhaps some of those things were done so that the incoming administration, such as the administration of Bola Tinubu, can face the problems of it, because some of those things have to be thought through properly. Now, we've been talking for many years about the need for respective states to actually generate their own electricity. If you're talking about consumption in Lagos, by virtue of the number of industries here and many other things that surround Lagos, Lagos actually makes use of a lot of electricity. You may want to say Kano has the same population at about that, but in terms of economic activities, Lagos stands tall above many others. It therefore means that Lagos needs to be weaned off the national grid strategy of keeping electricity on. And I think that that is the way to go right now. So I believe very strongly that up until this moment, many administrations have done that to keep other states on the teters, or to keep other states tied to the apron strings of government. But if you really want everything to happen and happen properly, then you have to let states begin to show capacity. So I think it's, along the lines of the Lagos initiative of the Independent Power Project that has been put in, at different locations, so that they can ensure that at least every state which has the capacity is able to generate electricity, and that impacts on the economy of the state where the electricity is being generated. So I think that it's a very good move in the right direction for the president. But at the same time, we have to consider, when you're talking about generating electricity, it's important to also know that the cost factor is key. Patronage is something that would come in. The last time I was in the US, I was having a conversation with somebody at the supermarket who was trying to know how much I pay for electricity and the fact that I can pay less. So you should create opportunities for many people that can actually enable you pay as you want to pay for electricity, so that you don't have to pay humongous amounts. So I think it's good.
Okay, so let's look at security. We would have expected that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would have addressed the situation in Benue as well as Southern Kaduna.
Yes, please.
But that wasn't talked about. He just mentioned the fact that, security is topmost in terms of priority for his administration. You recall, too, that on Sunday, when the exited Muhammadu Buhari as president, while he was giving his last speech, to Nigerians, we also expected that he would have said something in that line, having to show that sense of sympathy that I feel you, I did my best, I really did my best in regards to that, and it's not like I do not know what is going on, I'm not oblivious. But we thought that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would say something, towards that. He did not address that. So he just, basically just generalized insecurity is topmost. The same thing too that President Muhammadu Buhari said. Do you think that there is something wrong with our leaders not having to pay or mention the things literally affecting people? The Nigerians need to know how they intend to solve these issues.
Comparatively, President Muhammadu Buhari, former President Muhammadu Buhari, was a very poor communicator. And it's unfortunate that he also had people who spoke on his behalf, and they have this air around them, especially his senior special assistant, media, Garba Shehu, who was equally a man that cannot stem his emotions. On air, anger, on air, impatience, lack of circumspection. Those were actually the hallmarks of a Garba Shehu. But let's say this very clearly. Nigerians are smart and intelligent people. And if you fall into the trap that they create for you, you bear the brunt of it. I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was careful not to fall into that trap, because if you look at when he gave the speech, at least less than 24 hours before that, we didn't have major insecurity issue. He doesn't want to put himself in a trap when Nigerians will say, you promised A, B, C, and D. Don't forget that the administration that left office promised 3 million jobs a year.
Yes.
They didn't give us 3 million jobs. And up until the time they left office, we were referring to that, and we're always showing them the picture of their manifesto. So I think that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has learned from experience that if he fell into that same trap, it is not going to be a good way to start. Now, for the former president, I have to say this, that a man that has spent the greater part of his years as a military officer may be somebody who doesn't understand the dynamics of political communication. And I have advised them on different platforms that have been that you have to stop or reduce the number of writers that speak on your behalf. The broadcast media, for instance, teaches people the psychology of spontaneous communication, and it enables you to understand the brickbats that come when you are doing things on the spot. Many people who write do not have the capacity to do that because they've not been ingrained with the capacity to deliver as such. You have a Garbache who has written on his life, you have an additional who has written on his life, where they process things at times before they say it. Many people who process this have to look at back and forth, but the people who occupy the broadcast medium are taught to speak on the spot of the moment and understand the psychology. So I think that that's an advice that I hope that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will take. But coming back to the issue, I have to say, the security situation is such that you have to understand it before you talk about it. Elias Sharibu is one of the down terms of the President Muhammadu Buhari administration because they've made that young girl who was taken by kidnappers, a mother in the afternoon. I have done a transliteration of a Yoruba word. One saw the Yalo Songon. I'm simply saying this for us to know that President Muhammadu Buhari did what he could. But don't forget, somebody could do the best in a class of 25 and come 24 out of 25. Another person could do the best and come first out of people who are 25 in the class. So he said he has done his best. We appreciate the fact that we had a smooth transition to another administration. But in terms of security here, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been very careful enough not to fall into the trap of promising too much and failing.
Is that why he didn't even say anything about it during his campaign?
Yes, let's say this. During his campaign, I think that's the terrible side of Nigerian politics. Because if you didn't say that, for instance, when you have your inauguration, that is a tie back to the fact that you didn't say anything while the campaign was on. So perhaps he felt, I didn't say anything there. If I mention anything that they say, you have power in your hands and so you want to talk to us, why did you assure us? Excuse me, Mose, Nigerians are intelligent and could take you to the cleaners if you're not smart. You have to be smart to deal with Nigerians. And the reality is, when a problem of this nature comes up, we always have that mindset to feel that the buck stops at the table of the person who, for instance, is the one who has been elected. I agree. Leadership takes the most account of it. But what about the people who should support the leadership of a country, the leadership of a state, and do the best they could? For instance, let's look at the filling stations yesterday. On the island, they start selling 500 naira per litre. That's not President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That is the owner of the filling stations who are taking that commodity or taking that product at a discounted rate and have decided to make Nigerians miserable by selling at that rate. So we should understand that that statement he made was, it is what I want to do. But he has not given a date. They've not done official communication in that regard. So why is it that Nigerians are not making life difficult for people? So I think that we should understand the things we should. But in terms of security, I think Bola Ahmed Tinubu should have said something while he was campaigning, giving assurances that I'll do the best I can. I may not understand the full detail of everything or the full, picture of it, but I will do my best. And even when he assumed office, at the inauguration, he could reiterate that and said, I know that security is a very tough call in this country, but I'll do my best. So I think that that's how I want to respond to that question.
All right then. Tony Nadi has joined us virtually. We want to welcome him on board. Good morning, Tony. All right, so we hear that we're having a little bit of an issue with his connection there. Well, we'll wait for him to come back in. Now, talking about the removal of fuel subsidy,
yes,
and the ripple effect it is having right now, can there be a regulatory body to ensure that the price is not taken above a certain benchmark so Nigerians will not be made to suffer?
Moses, I think it's important to put things rightly first. The administration of President Muhammadu Buhari messed up a big time when they, removed their own legs from the pedal and start talking about somebody's private business in the name of Dangote Refinery. I think that it is a failure of government. Only last week, Thursday or Friday, it's in the news where Emefiele was speaking about the Dangote Refinery, and he said some things that I find quite disturbing. that this Dangote refinery belongs to us, we're the one that helped him to get that refinery going, and that we could be able to access dollars from it. You know, all kinds of ridiculous things to talk about. Even if we say that government has about 20% equity stake in it, I think it is also ridiculous to want to, you know, transfer the responsibility of government suddenly on somebody because his business is Nigerian, his business is here, and that is Nigerian. I think that is something suspicious. And I've asked several times, who owns Dangote refinery? The fiscal, the financial aspect of that refinery is still very, very blurry to me. At some point, they needed 12 billion US dollars. The federal government talked about giving $9 billion to it, and they came to tell us that Dangote has actually paid 7 billion. Okay. About 70%. 70%. So you've paid 70%, the refinery has not started. How did you recoup the money? I know that Dangote is big in Africa, and we know that other businesses it does may not be as heavily paying as the crude business. So the crude business has not effectively started production, and we learned that he has paid 100% of it. Now, Emefiele cannot be trusted anyway. Let me put that on record here for the world to hear. Because at the period of the COVID, they told us that we're locked down, that they went to people's homes to give money and food to them. And to this time, we don't have the names and addresses of those that he sanctioned them to go and give food when they locked us down. So Emefiele has said a lot of things that we cannot believe, as the man who is the handler of the Apex, the country's Apex Bank. But that said, I believe that in terms of, getting power running, getting electricity running, we need to go back to look at the details of it. What is the current situation? Now, I said this, for people who maybe read some of the things that I write and, watch some of my videos, when they actually change the name of NNPC to NNPCL, I cried out and say, this switch in nomenclature has not effectively brought about the change we need. And don't forget that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari had the responsibility to bring into effect the Petroleum Industry Act as it is, but rescinded that position and said they are not going to implement it. Don't forget, the Petroleum Industry Bill had been there, languishing for ages up until the time it was signed by the administration that left office. Now, sooner had it been signed that they decided that they cannot run it fully because there are lots of things to it. Now, in the midst of not wanting to actually take effect of the Petroleum Industry Act, you are now telling us that you have an NPCL. So that simply means a select administration of an act that should be fully administered is what we found. So in truth, I have to say that there's a lot of work for the current administration. And the truth is nobody will want to hear that the previous administration did this because it's the same political party. That is where the conversation will change. Because for the first 4 years of this administration, the political party that held office was blamed much for the problems. And even when they returned, they took us into 2 recessions. That's on record here. So I think that for the current president, his work is cut out for him already. The administration that preceded him failed on a lot of grounds. You are talking about Dangote refinery. I'm saying this. Who is telling us the year before NNPCL, the Kaduna refinery amassed a lot of losses, yet they spent a lot of money, saying that they sent people on training for a refinery that wasn't working. We've had how many refineries? Turnaround maintenance is almost every year. And that is when the carry man that ends NNPC speaks. He just talks, and his statement also is full of lies. I'm worried by that because I carefully listen to how he speaks to people to impress, but the issues are not changing. So I think that this administration has to be very sincere, especially when it comes to the aspect of, the nation's crude and all of that. They're talking about power. So these things are very key.
Thank you. Now, we have joining us virtually Tony Nadi, who is the Secretary of the Lower Niger Congress, and Victor Ohai, who is a political commentator as well as a social affairs analyst. Good morning and welcome to VOP this morning, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to start with you, Tony Nadi. Interestingly, it happens to be that Tinubu is taking charge of a fractured polity racked by insecurity, a broken economy, and a population of over 200 million persons divided and seething with discontent. It's obvious that the position he's occupying now, it cannot be envied by anyone. My question to you is this: what are the right steps he needs to start off with in order to heal the fracture that had already been created or more divided by the administration that just left?
Well, when you decide to play God, God turns up to show all present that he's God. There could be no better punishment for the fellow than what he's confronted with now, because he tried to play God and landed us in this mess.
What fellow, please?
The one that is now coronated as president.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
So you say, until it's resolved in the place of adjudication, he remains, the election is still very much in process. Kid ourselves about that. The election is in process. The Court of Appeal will deal with it. The Supreme Court will deal with it. But quite apart from that, back to where we are and what is the nature of what has turned up. We may be chasing shadows here and there. When he went to bring Muhammad Buhari from retirement, with all of Muhammad Buhari's records, to become president in 2015, he was doing so to bring back the alliance of 1967. There was an alliance of the conservative North and the renegade wing of the Southwest that came to the East in 1967. That's the monster we're dealing with now, because it was that alliance that had to kill off over 3.5 million people in the eastern part to keep Nigeria one on violence, on the basis of violence. It was that alliance that imposed the constitution that has now turned out to be a nightmare to all of us in 1979. The alliance we built, in your introduction, yes, I'm Secretary General of Global Nigeria Congress, but I'm also co-convener of Nigerian Indigenous Nationalists for Self-Determination. The owners of Nigeria are saying, this project must be ours. The Nigeria we're talking about is made up of sovereign national entities. That's there are people who could have been countries of their own. Europe could be a country of 60 million people. Egypt could be a country of its own. Igbo could be a country of its own. So if we are to be called the Federation of Nigeria, it will be because we decided by ourselves to be in Nigeria. The accident of Britain coming to lump us together in 1914 could be put in the past. The question of what we decided in Lancaster House as basis of union.
All right, okay.
Tony, hello.
If you choose to
no. Let's focus. Let's focus. No, let's focus. Yes, we asked you what you thought.
You want me to begin?
We asked you what you thought about the speech made by the president, the current president of Nigeria. That was the question we asked. The speech that he made. What your thoughts on the speech? Can we keep it in line, please?
Well, the line, if that is what we came to discuss, I probably have more serious thing to do with my time. What I want to say to us is that there's a problem that we have to solve. There's no Nigeria for any of them to govern. That's the position, the organization I speak for.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Before they went to election.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. We do appreciate your thoughts.
Victor, hi. Good morning to you. Welcome once again. Now, you heard the speech by the president yesterday. He touched on a few things, security being one of them. Well, what's your take on the speech in general before we go into dissecting them bit by bit? All right, we can't hear you.
Victor, maybe you should unmute. Okay, yes, now we can hear you.
We can hear you better now.
Okay, you know what they say, talk is cheap. I can't say the other half because it's American and it might not appear other things, but talk is cheap. We've heard speeches, commencement speeches, if you like, there's such a thing, by presidents before now. But I think what is more important is first body language and secondly what you actually do. I didn't think, I mean, in terms of what people want to hear in the speech, they tried their best to say what they could, but there were so many elements that were missing. I expected that as champion of Pronaco, Nadeco, and the rest, the issue of restructuring, something he had always championed, that would have been at the top of the agenda of now that he's in power. Because it's one thing to be an activist, it's another thing to be in a place where you can implement what you're talking about. I never heard anything like that. And of course, what that simply means is most times people just, agitate, make noise, create relevance so they can get into power. And when they get there, then the true nature shows. I thought that should have been at the core of it because we know, for instance, that for this country to grow properly, then the federating units have to have a say. I didn't hear anything about all the usual things we talk about, state police and the rest of them, that they have been champions of, that he in particular has led. I didn't hear any of that. And I felt that, the president should have been, he should have led front telling by example of what he had been talking about. He has the usual things about security. We heard that. After all, Buhari talked about security, the economy, and corruption. But we know how he left the country. So I want to see beyond rhetoric what he'll be able to do. But from what I see right now, I think that he's trying to be politically correct. This was a problem that happened. This was what happened to Jonathan when he got into government, where he felt obligated to certain people, and because of that, he couldn't take proper action. He couldn't do what he felt was right, and then Nigerians had to pay dearly for it. I'm afraid that the current president may have already fallen into that trap, trying to please those he perceives as having put him in power right now, and against his better judgment, doing whatever he feels will be pleasing to those who are put him in power.
All right, Tony, please, I'm going to ask you the next question, and I would implore you to please try to respond based on that question. Now, the economy is reeling, headlined by 77 trillion naira debt, a collapsing currency, record inflation, unemployment, and revenue shortfalls. Infrastructure is shabby and grossly inadequate, and the education and health systems are in crisis. Human capital is fleeing abroad, and of course, the country is ranked about 16th of 179 countries in the 2022 Fragile State Index of the Fund for Peace. Now, my question to you is this: with these already encapsulated and based on the speech that was made by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what would you propose should be the first strategic course of action to correct this malaise?
I will just reiterate or repeat what Professor Wole Soyinka said when he was answering questions about who has, committed treason. He said that whoever finally gets sworn in should realize that nothing is going to improve on any front except they stop everything they are doing and reconstruct the constitutional basis of Nigeria. There is nothing that is going to improve in security as long as we have arms and ammunition on the exclusive list, so that I have to depend on people who do not wish me well to organize my security. That is what it means for me. And it's not going to improve for the people of Plateau. It's not going to improve for the people of Southern Kaduna. It's not going to improve for people of Benue. It's not going to improve for people of all the people who are now living in the apprehension. You see what's going on in Niger area, or the Niger State area, going all the way down to Zamfara. So the fact is that there's an agenda to invade and take over land. And it is now driving the insecurity we see. We talk about the infrastructure. On the exclusive list, everything that we need to tackle the infrastructure is on that list, in that constitution. There's no magic any new president to perform to improve on that. You have the question of even this refinery. How did we come about one person being licensed to do refinery where the constitution locks down the capacity to refine by the exclusive list. That's the only reason we don't have petroleum products. And there's no magic. People talking about subsidy. What is the meaning of subsidy when we have 3 million barrels of crude that the country can pump out every day? We have every capacity to refine the quantity. The 10% of it will service us, fully. Everything we process can go to export. So instead of putting our weak naira to go and chase after the dollar you need to buy, you reverse it by opening up. It is that constitution that put refineries on the exclusive list. I'm talking to the labor movement now because they will soon jump onto the street. I'm talking to the NSAS people, they will soon jump onto the street. Everybody will come to complain. The reason we don't have petroleum products, and we're not going to have it, is that refineries are on the exclusive list. No matter what you do, unless you make it open for people to go and refine, you're going to be dancing round and round until it collapses completely. The Dangote that has now been licensed in monopoly,
yeah.
There are thousands of people that can refine. Yeah. I was in the oil industry myself. I know enough of how crude oil is processed for the various products.
That's true.
I've practically presided over it, at the highest levels you can imagine. And now the federal government that seized control by way of that constitution, you can see what has happened to their 4 refineries. None is happening. Then, instead of solving that problem, somebody decides, as part of the asset stripping, if we can pretend to the end of time that there's no Fulani agenda. There's an asset stripping. That is the reason Dangote is given that monopoly. The crude oil is taken from the owners without any account. Where's the ownership in all of it that you seize that crude oil by constitution? It is the constitution on the exclusive list that lists oil and gas, ports, and other economic assets as belonging to a federal government in a situation where our federation had collapsed. We don't have a federation, we have a country.
All right,
but
so
we agreed to be a federation. And
thank you very much.
Everything is upside down.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, you
Everything
seem to
is
be very
upside down.
well. You do have a whole lot to say. Let me come to
Yes,
you now.
please.
You seem to be concurring.
Quite frankly, I have to say that I differ with Tony on some grounds, but with regard to the refinery owned by Dangote, I agree with him 101%.
Okay.
Nobody is communicating to us about what is taking or what will be taken daily to refine. Because when you're talking about giving somebody, just one person, the operational license, and that thing is supposed to be on the exclusive list, then it calls to question the exclusivity of that refinery itself. Don't forget, about 2 years ago, we raised issues about the gold in Zamfara and how they have been mining that gold, whereas it's supposed to be on the exclusive list. Then we ask the question, why is it that certain parts of the country are having access to the resources that is supposed to be under the auspices of the federal government? That is another question. Let me say this. When we're talking about the COVID-19, Dangote and Bua were the only ones given license to move their trucks all around. We've got businesses across this country. Other people were prevented from doing their businesses, but they gave Dangote the opportunity, and of course Bua. So I'm simply saying that what Unadi is saying is enough for the average Nigerian to feel there is no consideration for symmetry of growth in this country. And that will continue to engender disaffection, where segments of this country will disagree with the intention of government as stated. And I think that if at all this country will function, I have said it, the constitution first is the albatross of the country. If you open to page 1 or 2 of that, you see we the people never put that paperwork together. That's one. So if we want to talk about dealing with our issues that will make the likes of Tony Nadi not believe in the system, I said that this, I've listened to him. Tony Nadi could not be joking. And I think that the reason he has so much pent-up disaffection is because over the years, he understands a lot that many people do not, that I do. So I'm simply saying that that aspect must be looked into. We're talking about financial power of an individual being consolidated at the expense of other people who have the equal capacity to do the same and distribute wealth across this country. And do not forget, if you have the financial power, most definitely, you will likely be in control of politics, because politics itself is about money and power. In every country of the world, the person who has money is close to those who have power. And the person who has money can control those who have power. Up to the US, up to Canada, up to Russia. You need to ask yourself why NATO is against Russian oligarchs. Because you cannot be wealthy in your country and not be close to government. Because you are dependent upon to ensure that the economy is smooth, your taxes, the people you employ. So I think that it is key for the world to listen to what Tony Nadi said regarding how government appears to strategically empower a segment of this country, because that will also be to our disadvantage as a people, and it will continue to generate this unrest across this country. So I must say, I appreciate the position of Tony Nadi as far as that.
So what do you think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should do, considering that this is realistically what is on ground? We have we've seen the line where it's told. What should be the corrective measure he should do?
The first thing is the same way you've given Dangote the license and giving him such land, the opportunity. You can do the same for every other person. Tony Nadi's one, quite frankly, is a highly cerebral person who understands his onions. He might not have met me, but I've read him over time, and I know that he's somebody who is passionate about adding value and doing what has to be done. Even Victor High, he said something. Victor High said something that maybe you people felt it should go. No. He said, because you want to more or less, dance to the tune and tone of those that you perceive to have given you power, that's why certain things that we understand Tinubu for, the Nadeko years, the struggle to ensure that we have a functional Nigeria, those things are
I was going to come to that.
Yes,
because the thing is, if you say he's dancing to the tune
please.
of those in power, then we know that a lot of people in power did not want fuel subsidy to be removed.
Look,
but he has made a pronouncement which comes across as not even dancing to the tune, which comes across as taking the bull by the horn and doing what needs to be done.
That is just one out of a lot of things. He was talking about, essentially, I believe that maybe when you go back to Dr. High, he'll tell you, he was speaking to the issue of unbundling this dysfunctional country. Unbundling doesn't mean we tear Nigeria apart, we don't let it remain. Unbundling means the imbalances that are perceived is dealt with. Now, Tony Nadi mentioned something about the exclusive list having the control of ammunition. You go to the you go to the Second Amendment. You can hate Americans, but the Second Amendment allows you to hold guns and protect yourself so that when the enemy comes, I think it was in 2018 where there was attack on Logo and Goma, where you have over 100 persons killed, pregnant women. Before that period, we learned that the former defense minister, the one that preceded Magishi, appealed to the people of Benue to please bring the ammunition that they want peace. It was after they handed over the ammunition that they massacred people. So I'm simply saying that when the enemy is aware of equal capacity for destruction, the enemy stays away from you.
That's true.
And I'm simply saying here that for this country to function, perception about the imbalances that continue to make us appear as if some people are more powerful than the other, should be dealt with. Let me say this. The Southeastern nation, for instance, let's do a little review of the Civil War. Apart from maybe some support that the Southeastern nation has from maybe some few foreign countries, the Southeastern nation essentially fought the Civil War by its own capacity. So I'm simply saying here that when a particular region of the country has demonstrated over time its capacity for industry, self-protection, that means that region of the country is adding value. How do you then strengthen that region of the country such that it continues to add value? Let's understand, 20 pounds given to the Southeast after the Civil War, it has become a nation of reckon. I'm simply saying that we are better when we ensure the respective regions are made to flourish than this prevention of a region. And the point is, why do you have to be afraid? If I have done injustice to you, Moses, or you, it is likely that I don't want you to thrive because I feel that your capacities will disrupt or disturb that which will happen. So I think that Nigeria, under Tinubu, should begin to address the core issues that make the three of us speak to these things, because we won't be here if we don't want a better country. We won't be here if we don't want this country to. So all of these reactions and passions that we see when we talk are engendered by having discovered the imbalances in this country. And if at all we want Nigeria to function, such that we won't have many people still leave this country because people are living in droves. Then we have to start taking this issue seriously. So that's how I want to actually react to this position.
All right, so let me come to you now, Victor Okay. We're looking at let's look at the issue of restructuring. Do you see a possibility that the president might consider, restructuring, and in what ways do you think that can be done?
Let me tell you a little thing about power. It's easy when you are an activist to say, look, let's restructure, let's break down the power and all that. But when you are the one having all the power, there's some things, some people, let me say this about human beings generally. 3 areas that are very sensitive: money, power, and let me just use the word loosely, love. There are some things that some people will not share. These are areas that people will not take from them without their permission. They will do anything to protect it, or they can even kill for it. Now, this man's life ambition has been to become president. Now he's president. You want him to whittle down his power? I don't understand it. And don't forget that he's not very good at managing power. Let me explain what I mean. He's the only governor I know that has had 3 deputy governors. Kufuor, then the banker, I don't remember his name now, whose career has been almost permanently damaged. He couldn't go back to banking. He became totally irrelevant in politics, and he's still trying to fight way back. And then finally, I think Ojikutu. Now, so which means he doesn't know how to share power. Maybe he has changed, I don't know. Now, you put him in charge of the whole country, and you now want to say to him, let the region become independent. You want to take some of that power away from him. I don't see that happening. I don't see him as being that generous. I don't see him as being that gracious, as to be true to what he was fighting. When he was fighting because he wanted to get, we saw what they did against Jonathan. We know why all that happened and all that. Now that he's in charge, let me put Abiola's name, Kashimawo. But frankly, I don't see him going back to restructuring. I don't see him whittling down his power now that he's in charge, devolving power to the states. I don't see that happening. That is my view. Maybe, just maybe.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Well, we may start on the last things that he said there.
Okay, so I'll come back to you. I think we don't have Tony joining us anymore, so I'm going to come back to you.
I'm here.
Oh, you're
I'm
here.
here.
Okay, Tony. All right, so President Bola Ahmed Tinubu made a few appointments yesterday, although he said he's going to be setting up his cabinet in the next 60 days. That's approximately 2 months. Exactly. Okay, so now here is the situation. Yesterday, he was able to put, let's just say, some key persons, new media, one of his, that's media aid, and one of his aides as well for digital media, in terms of how responses will take place. In his speech, he made something concerning while he made this appointment was necessary, because he knew that now that he has set the ground running, he understands the importance of communication. He appointed the former Lagos State Commissioner of Information, Dela Lake, as his presidential spokesman, and Olusegun Dada as special advisor, digital media. Now, of course, we do know that these are areas whereby anytime he just needs something transmitted to the people, these people will immediately do the needful in regards to that. We saw how the past administration was, would I say, quiet and mum when it came to communicating with the people on issues of national import, and we could actually see that there was favoritism for a certain ethnic group. Precisely. The president yesterday also said he was going to run an all-inclusive government. Do you think that he would do that? Do you see that possibility of that taking place now that he said in the next 60 days he'll be constituting his cabinet?
My first answer to say I'm not interested in all that. These are mundane discussions going on right now. But let me enter a few caveats so that who do not understand where we're coming from on this matter. So more. I speak for an organization that says nobody will be allowed to govern with this fraudulent constitution to which people have sworn yesterday. They say they are going to defend and uphold and govern by the constitution that makes impossible every single thing he says he's going to do. He says he's going to do all-inclusive Uhuru Kenyatta at the inaugural lecture, telling them that Kenya was in the same situation for many years. The British lumped together ethnic, nations into and said that they were at each other's throats for decades until sanity and until he came close to power and sanity began to return, where he challenged even the opposition and said, "Look, we have a responsibility here to take charge of our affairs, to take a responsibility for our space." And what they did was to call a meeting to discuss how they would live together. It became a change of constitution. The constitution that was there before, they had to rework it among themselves by discussion. They took it to referendum. So it became their project. It was somebody else's project. Nigeria, under this constitution of 1990, under a unitary constitution, whether it was 1979 when it was first imposed or 1999, is not our project. All
right, Tony, let me ask you this question. In all of your responses, responses that you've been asking, you've been emphasizing on the Constitution.
Let me enter a caveat. Okay. Allow me. You asked a question. You are talking about the appointment of Dela Lake and all kinds of other people.
I'm not talking about appointment. I'm talking about communicating to the people and running an all-inclusive government. I mentioned that because those were the first appointments he made as soon as he assumed office.
Will you let me speak? Those things he wants to communicate are things that he cannot do, except he wants to lie. Under this constitution, the first question on the table, did we submit, is it true that we agreed to live in this manner? Is it true that we wrote this constitution that tie my hands to the back on all fronts? My economic assets are in the hands of people who came to kill me to take it. Lagos Port that have been property of Yoruba people. Is that constitution that exclusive property of those getting the revenue from it and then to this date? When he was governor here, I'm not a stranger to Nadeko, I'm sure you know that. Tinubu emerged from our midst. If we were going to allow some kind of let us explain to the new president, to other people, we said so since 3 years ago, openly, that anybody who is coming to govern Nigeria, to drag us around on this question that we know what the issue and how they are avoiding addressing the issues. Tinubu was a product of that Nadeko. He was a facilitator of Pronaco. And I was at the core of how into Pronaco. I was there when Obasanjo was running doing his brigade against them. We had to support them because they had identified with the intervention we were making to rework the constitutional basis of Nigeria so that it can become our project. Today, it is not our project, and whatever it will take, we are not interested in any. Either we make it our project or we dismantle it forthwith, because it is costing so much life. It has become the albatross of the black man. Unless something happens to man from here, Nigeria will be reason the black man is dragging itself in the mud. And that constitution is 95% responsible for everything we complain about. And so, if somebody comes to swear to defend and uphold worse than apartheid, something that is far worse than apartheid constitution, if he swears to defend and uphold it, in part of how to free the energies that can become productive, everybody is fighting in their own path.
All right.
You seize everything and you turn around to point guns at me.
All
And
right
they've
then.
been asking for a discussion on the subject. We are not interested in whatever hogwash he may want to communicate.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Tony Nadi. We do appreciate your passion there, but we also do know that these are your views on the issues so far. Now,
Absolutely.
absolutely, and we also respect that. All right. Now let's look at the president did say something. I'm going to come to you now.
Yes, please.
Adeni. He said something. He talked about investors and double taxation.
Yes, please.
And some schools of thoughts in Lagos were, believed that when he was in Lagos and the things that he left behind, Lagosians were taxed greatly. Were made to pay certain things, to have access to good roads and all of that. There was great taxation. Now, he said, I'm going to quote him now.
Yes, please.
He said, I have a message for our investors, local and foreign. Our government shall review all their complaints about multiple taxation and various anti-investment inhibitions. We shall ensure that investors and foreign businesses repatriate their hard-earned dividends and profits home. Do you think he'll be able to tackle multiple taxation, or should Nigerians expect more taxation?
Well, these are highlights of what he wants to do. And I'll be patient enough to see the roadmap to achieving that within the next 2 months, since we should have ministers who will help drive that vision. That is very key. But I have to look at Lagos, for instance. Lagos has, first, for transportation, quadruple taxation from Agberos. They collect in the morning, afternoon, and night. Don't forget that these monies are supposed to be revenues for government. At times when we talk about taxation, people want to look at, the officialdom of the collection. But that's really not what I'm saying here. If you could have people who are into transportation business in the state and they are collecting and remitting, I think it is first to begin from the state where you've governed, where everybody goes back to their respective parts. You have just a ticket a day, you harmonize whatever it is you want to collect, because how can you pay in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night? A war song and some other thing. So I think that if you're talking about dealing with it, now the reason I prefer to Lagos is Lagos is an investment hub because of security and opportunities. And of course, you know that there are lots of international corporations that are headquartered here. So I think that that is where he should begin from. You can go to other parts of the country as well. So when we talk about charity and it begins at home, then we've made a lot of sense from it. So that is where I want to begin. But is it possible? Yes, it is possible. There should be tax incentives to begin with. For instance, if you're talking about foreign direct investments, the Buhari administration actually had, such investment go southward, before it left office, because certain things were not being addressed. I think that we can enable, an upward movement of the arrow of investment if there are definite assurances and stability in government policies. Let me say this. Somebody intends to invest about $5 billion US, maybe in Nigeria's telecommunications industry or some kind of infrastructure. The first thing you should do to that person, in the first place, don't forget that only last week the Money Policy Committee increased the rate to about 18.5. In the midst of the economic hardship, I still do not understand what is wrong with the Emefiele. Because anytime we talk about taxes, it's about taking more from the people. There are no innovative ways of making things happen. So when people see that 18.5% of Emefiele, they begin to wonder, I thought that this is what it is. But don't forget, Emefiele has been ruling and riding with the previous administration. There are no guarantees if you'll be in office anyway. But to also say that both monies, new and old, the new we no see, the old we still struggle for. The president has assured that both remain legal tender. So having said that, it is first to ensure that the people who bring in such monies that will, create opportunities for employment, infrastructure, and in the country are able to say that maybe for the first 5 years, you will not pay taxes, but will ask that 2% of any profit you make within that, let it go into certain infrastructure to help the country. There are ways you build incentives such that investors are able to start thinking, okay, we can take that. Don't forget, also tied to this investment, is the fact that the people who bring in their monies here will be able to repatriate it. The reason some airlines don't fly here is simply because how could you take people's money from their country or region, you invest it in Nigeria, and when it's time to repatriate the funds, you are not able to do that. It is some kind of disastrous economic policy. And I'm hoping that Emefiele doesn't remain in that office. I am hoping sincerely. I'm saying it for the world to hear. Because he has advised and created more hardship for the people as the one who heads the Apex Bank than any of his predecessors. Because as the Central Bank of Nigeria, at the height of problematic situations, you're supposed to think out of the box to provide solutions. Maybe he's still dancing to the tune of the Bretton Woods institutions because he's been in Geneva at some point. His intelligence as an individual. But the application and the transfer of intelligence in fiscal policies is what I have problems with. So I think that it is possible if they sit properly and look at how to create incentives for those who are bringing their monies, because after all, Nigeria needs all the money it can get at this point in time.
All right, then. I think we've lost connection to our virtual guests, so we'll stay with you now.
Yes, please.
He did say something. He said this will not be. Let me try to
Paraphrase
rephrase.
him, yeah.
He said this will not be dictatorship. We will consult. Do you see that? Do you see that?
Dr. High said something. He had 3 deputies. The name of the banker I forgot was Femi Pedro. He had 3 deputies. Ikuforiji, Pedro, and Ojikutu. Just one man.
Okay.
It tells you, in fact, I think that for, what was it, Ojiku or Kuforiji? There was one of the deputies, a woman here, I hope I got the name correctly, who was practically left in the cold while Bola Ahmed Tinubu was there. They said he doesn't know how to share power. And I tell you, leadership takes a lot.
That's what the woman said.
That's what Ohai said.
Okay.
That he doesn't know, Bola Ahmed Tinubu doesn't know how to share power. And I think that Obasanjo also demonstrated his incapacity for not being able to share power. And when you're talking about sharing power, it's a two-way street. The person who holds the superior power must know how to dangle the carrot and wield the stick. And the person who is subordinate to the one who holds power must also be humble enough to know that it's a privilege to work together. So when there is imbalance of scales, you're going to really have problems. Now, when they talk about dictatorship, let me say this. The current president is aware of certain statements made by the outgone president. I remember after former President Muhammadu Buhari returned from the UK, having stayed there for months to take care of himself, he came back and was talking to people that meant well for him to return with such voice that shouldn't be. See, there is a little circumspection and more of condescension because Oliver Goldsmith wrote a book, She Stoops to Conquer. And it is key to understand that we can take the title of that work and pitch it into respective areas of our life. Leadership takes a lot of heat, and leadership also engenders, certain things that will make them look at you, even in the most difficult of times, humility. So I think he recognizes that his predecessor probably was high-handed in certain areas and always feels that this is a military regime. Don't forget that for Tinubu, the Nadeko years, the pro-NACO years, they fought and believed that they should create change. For Olusegun Obasanjo, he led the civil war. He did all of that. President Muhammadu Buhari was also part of the civil war. So you find out that it is difficult for them to shed the toga of their military years because the greater part of their active years were spent fighting, conquering, dealing with, and they therefore have not been able to evolve into the democratic mindset that can enable them to connect with people. So I think very strongly that he realizes the pitfalls that his predecessors entered into, even if he didn't sprain his ankle, and is trying to avoid the same, I guess.
All right, then. So we've reconnected with Victor Ohai. So if you're there with us, I'm going to ask you the same question. The same question of consulting and not being a dictatorship. Do you see that happening? Victor? Hello,
Can
Victor.
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that the current president has very little choice in the matter of, we're not necessarily sharing power, but delegate for now, in the light of his current situation, as we saw in Chatham House. It does appear that now, whether nature or whatever has made it imperative that they would have to rely on other people in order to be very effective. We saw a little bit of that yesterday. Not all the TV cameras caught it, but one of them caught it. He couldn't sign those. He made it, but he couldn't sign it. At the point in time, he was struggling for the pen with his wife. I'm sure the people around there will say, "Oh, you've already said it, that's okay." So, and Chatham House also showed that. So, what will now happen is that maybe the leader he was not, perhaps now he will be forced to be if he allows people, but he will have to depend on other people right now to be able to make things happen. He has a final say, obviously, but delegation right now, what you'll find is, I think this regime will have more cabal than Nigeria has ever experienced before, because there will be a group of people now who he would have to rely on to, to decide on a lot of things and decide what happens. That is what I see happening.
All right, so Tony Nnadi, I'm coming to you now. Let's touch on the issue of foreign policy. When he talked about foreign policy, he mentioned Sudan and how Nigeria handled the issue, and he also did say that maintaining peace around our neighbors in West Africa will be topmost in his foreign policy. What do you make of that?
Again, back to cause and effect.
Yeah.
What do we have now? Why are we where we are with the rest of the world? And then what do we do to reverse this? On the global arena, and I happen to have been directly in 2019, from January, end of July, the US government that was at war with ISIS in the Middle East took its time to listen to what we came to share with them about what was happening in our space. It fell on me to lead that discussion. It was our organization that was raising their, and they invited us over on Capitol Hill. I spoke in Congress, both in the House, in church, and in the Senate. And later we went on to State Department. That same discussion went all the way, and when they had to send a rapporteur mission to come to find out why blood was flowing all over Nigeria, led by Agnes, can Google Agnes Calamat, UN rapporteur mission that came in August. We returned in July, and by August, the US had gone to share with the Security Council at the UN what happened in Nigeria that could affect the whole world. Because the terror networks of the Middle East, ISIS, was making what we went to share with the US was that the terror networks had made a redirection. They were coming to the West African sub-region to reinforce themselves to resume the fight on bigger scale. So we went to tell the US that our commander-in-chief, our president and commander-in-chief, who is a known sympathizer of Boko Haram, that has now become ISIS with ISWAP with ISIS, that he was the one receiving them, and that he had thrown our borders open for his Fulani kinsmen to come from all over the place. And in what looked like a joint venture between those terror networks and the Fulani that wants to take everybody's land, that they were reinforcing themselves and handing over the Nigeria's sovereign assets, including military assets, to those that they are just running riots all over the sub-region, but Nigeria as their home. And therefore, that if the US will not stand up and join in how to find a way to stop them before they become more powerful than anybody can contend with, because the whole of the West Africa, Niger is there, bigger than Nigeria, Chad is there, bigger than Nigeria, Mali is there, bigger than Nigeria, almost basically ungoverned spaces. Libya has already unraveled, and that if we do not stop this from taking over the sovereign assets of Nigeria, that Buhari was enabling with his Fulani kinsmen, that we're going to wake up to a big monster that will defy even the US, and that the US will pay in blood. It took 7 months because before then, what they were selling to them was climate change and farmers and herdsmen clashing, which was far from the truth. And but the root of the matter that it was actually an ethnic agenda to take over the space and make it a Fulani country in which the terror networks will now have an operational base bigger than Syria and Iraq combined. That's what's going on. And so when you begin with what you're doing with foreign this and that, these are discussions that are happening about Nigeria. And in consequence of the US put Nigeria on the watch list. You saw it. And then subsequently put them as a country of particular concern along with Iran. We are brewing. And so if the world, all of that, and for the US to have taken it to the UN, that now occasioned the rapporteur mission of Agnes Calamat in August of 2019, that Agnes Calamat mission to the conclusion that what was happening because Nigeria had something that looked like pressure cooker for injustice.
All right, then. Can we? Time is of the essence. Tony, time is of the essence. So we'd like for you to just wrap up in 1 minute or less. Let's have your closing thoughts because we have to wrap up the show now. I'm going to stay with you, Tony.
Right.
Please.
The only thing I'm going to say is that. Let us work with the truth. Okay. The lives of 200 million people at stake. Everything concerning them is at stake.
All right.
There was a caveat I wanted to enter. What we're saying is not because Tinubu emerged. We said that nobody will govern with that constitution. Peter Obi had said that the constitution is not the problem. And we said that he will come to the point where he himself will announce to the whole world that the constitution of Nigeria is... He has won the election. The centralized control has made it impossible for him to be president. He's in court now fighting.
All right.
2 days ago, when talking about the IDP camp and the...
All right, so that's your 1 minute. That's your 1 minute. We appreciate.
Let's. He has again said that the invasion is not about land. That
okay. All right then. Thank you very much, Tony.
None of them is going to be allowed to govern with this constitution.
We appreciate you coming on the program. All right, so now let's go to you, Victor Okai. Let's have your closing thoughts. 1 minute, please. All right. Do we have... Go ahead.
What I'd like to say is, because there's no vacuum in governance or in government, whoever is there at the moment, and whether today or tomorrow or whatever, it's important to note that as soon as you empower, parties should no longer matter. Cronyism, nepotism, what you should do is become a father of a nation. I'm hoping that the current president will unite Nigerians and do the right thing and be more legacy-minded. That's where I rest my case.
All right, unite Nigeria and do the right thing. All right, Adeni Ikunu?
Well, let me first of all say I'm happy that we could have this kind of conversation. It's pretty difficult to have a lot of platforms who want to speak to issues the way it's been spoken to, but I'm happy we've been able to do that. But having said that, I think that the average Nigerian should understand that power resides in his or her hand to either make things work or not. Now, we are stuck with the current president, except the court decides otherwise. And in our daily lives, we must look at how we can contribute positively, even if the leadership of the country is running amok, or rudderless on a space of water where they don't understand what they're doing. It's key for us that in every of what we do daily, we are able to demonstrate that we have the capacity to do right and help the country. Essentially, the leadership of the country must also listen, because you cannot have a house in peace if you're not listening to the people telling you that things must be addressed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We've been speaking with Tony Nnadi, a public affairs commentator, and also Victor Ohai, and most definitely Adeni Kunu. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Yeah.
We'll take a little break now. When we come back, we'll be delving into sports and, I beg your pardon, we'll be delving into business and entertainment.